Okay, here we are in Wikipedia again. And this article, of course, is on Civilization 2, the sequel to Civilization, which was released originally in 1996. They mention that it came out for Windows in that year and was ported to the PlayStation in 1998. They only just mention in passing that it was also available for Mac, and I've played both the Windows and the Mac versions, which are very similar. The main difference between the Mac and PC versions is that the Mac version uses QuickTime for the videos, because one of the major changes in terms of technology is that Civilization 2 uses video cutscenes for the wonders, to celebrate your wonders essentially, and it gives you a video-based council of advisors. So you'll see that when I do the playthrough. So it took advantage of the new, technology of the time, mostly for aesthetic reasons. Here's a screenshot. Well, the screenshot's a little bit too small. Would have been nice if they could have given us a bigger screenshot. But you won't miss it because it will be in the playthrough. But you can see it's an isometric representation, so it's sort of a perspective view, simulated 3D essentially. It was a two-dimensional game, in spite of all the use of video. The CGI was still two-dimensional in 1996. And the primary differences beyond addition of the videos, for one thing, the design team was led by Brian Reynolds, not by Sid Meier. And in addition, it offered a multiplayer function in later versions, from 1997 onwards. Although I've never tried the multiplayer function, because at the time that it was released, essentially, which was about the time that I got it, it was still rather difficult to do multiplayer online gaming, because the internet at that time was not really fast enough or reliable enough to do that sort of thing. In theory you could do it, but in practice almost nobody did, unless they had a university or government connection, and then you might get in trouble for wasting the government's time. But other differences, they had a lot more units, of course, a lot more city improvements, and a lot more technologies to discover. So your settlers can eventually be upgraded to engineers later on. You can get stealth aircraft in later stages of the game. And it's much easier to conduct diplomacy. I'll show you that later. So it is not as much of a war game as Civilization 1, and that was an intentional part of the design. So another thing they changed on the units was that they gave them hit points and so-called firepower ratings, so that your battleship would not lose to a phalanx, which was one of the silly bugs in the original one, because everything was based strictly on mathematical probabilities in the original Civilization. And of course, in real life, it's not as clear as that. Or at least you can go by probability, but it's a very different beast from how it was simulated in the original Civilization. And the objects are the same. You either take over the world or you get to Alpha Centauri before anybody else, and if you tie with somebody for getting to Alpha Centauri, you have to have more settlers there. And yeah, so it might be better just to look at the game. See if there's anything else here that I'm missing. Well, you could also get a fundamentalist government, a religious fundamentalist government, which I would argue is not too accurately portrayed because it's much more efficient than a real one. But that's not actually mentioned here. So anyway. One thing they're mentioning is obsession with the game and the tendency of the game to be somewhat addicting. You want to do turn after turn after turn after turn late into the night. Just one more turn. It says the addictive game that stole our childhood. So psychologically, the game is very similar to the original Civilization, certainly. Turn after turn. You always want to build a little bit more. But we'll get to the game now, I guess.